What if the reason you feel like you're not enough is because someone once made you feel like you were everything? It's a quiet ache, isn't it? Not the kind that screams, but the kind that lives in the silence after a good moment, when you laugh, succeed, or connect, only to feel hollow seconds later. A creeping suspicion emerges. Maybe I'm not enough after all. But what if that voice isn't yours? What if it's the echo of someone who once loved you with such clarity, such presence, that your entire being felt reflected, whole, worthy, undeniable? And now that they're gone, whether by time, distance, death, or slow indifference, you're not chasing approval. You're chasing the mirror they once were. You're not seeking validation because you're insecure. You're seeking reunion with a version of yourself that only came alive in their gaze. We often mistake this for weakness, for a flaw in self-esteem or a deficit in confidence. But in truth, this feeling of not enough is more like a phantom limb, a psychological remnant of love once felt deeply and fully. A part of you is still shaped by their presence, still defined by how they once saw you. We are never so defenseless against suffering, Freud once said, as when we love. Because to love is to open your entire emotional structure to another person's eyes. And when those eyes vanish, they take more than affection. They take a psychic confirmation of your value. So no, you're not broken, you're not irrational, needy, or dramatic. You're just remembering, not just the person, but who you were when you were loved in that rare, clean way. The tragedy isn't that you lost them, it's that you began to question your own worth in their absence. But here's the first truth. That feeling of not enough is not the beginning of your damage. It's the beginning of your remembering. The mirror cracked, but you are still whole. And if you sit with the ache long enough, it might just show you who you've been all along. There are moments in life when someone doesn't just enter your world, they see you, not superficially, not for your performance, but for something deeper, the shape of your inner world, the rhythm of your emotions, the quiet spaces you thought no one would ever notice. This person becomes more than a companion. They become what psychoanalysts call a good object. Not an object in the material sense, but a psychic imprint, a formative emotional presence that the mind holds on to and uses to build its sense of self. In object relations theory, first explored by Melanie Klein and later developed by Winnicott and Fairbairn, the good object is someone who meets your emotional needs with reliability, warmth, and attunement. It often begins in early childhood, a parent who picked you up when you cried, or a caregiver who responded to your hunger, not just with food, but with presence. But it can also emerge later, through a first love, a deeply bonded friend, even a mentor, someone who didn't ask you to earn affection but gave it simply because you existed. This good object becomes internalized, woven into your psychic architecture. Their voice, their gaze, their way of responding to you, it all becomes a template for how you relate to yourself and to the world. So what happens when the good object disappears? Maybe they left. Maybe they died. Maybe they stayed, but changed in a way that fractured your connection. Regardless of how they vanished, your psyche experiences the same rupture. The mirror is gone. The feelings that follow are rarely named as grief. They show up instead as self-doubt, anxiety, or that gnawing sense that something essential has gone missing inside you. You begin to question your worth, not because you are broken, but because the very person who once reflected your worth is no longer there. You may feel like you're unraveling, but what's really happening is this. Your mind is reaching for a familiar imprint, the good object, and coming up empty. The ache is the echo of a pattern that once helped you feel real, safe, and enough. And here's the paradox. The pain of their absence isn't a flaw. It's proof that you were once loved well enough to be shaped by it. The not enough feeling? That's not self-hatred. It's your psyche grieving the loss of reflection. Winnicott wrote about the transitional space, the psychological in-between where the external love once received must now become internalized. But for many of us, the transition is jagged. We don't know how to hold ourselves the way they once did. So instead, we H. We chase people who resemble them. We project hope onto strangers. We try to be good enough again, thinking maybe, just maybe, someone will reflect us the same way. But you don't need to be rescued. You need to remember that once someone saw you in a way that made you whole. and the parts of you they loved are still there. Dormant, maybe, but waiting. You're not falling apart. You're feeling the absence of a structure you once leaned on. But what was given once can be remembered, and what is remembered can be reclaimed. There's a specific kind of ache that doesn't belong to this world. It shows up in the shape of a person. Someone you swear you've waited for long before you met them. They arrive like myth. Their voice feels like déjà vu. And when they leave, it's not just heartbreak. It's cosmic disorientation. The kind that makes you question whether you'll ever feel real again. Jung would tell you, this is the anima or animus at work, the inner other that lives within your unconscious. The anima in a man or animus in a woman is the soul image, the opposite sex archetype that carries all the emotional, intuitive, instinctual qualities the ego has not yet integrated. And when someone in the outer world matches that inner image, or even just mirrors it, the psyche lights up. It's not love as biology, it's love as integration. You don't just fall for them, you fall for the parts of you they awaken. This is why it feels spiritual, fated, mythological. It's not just a relationship, it's a reunion. You're not just loving a person, you're reclaiming a dimension of your soul that's been waiting to be remembered. But Jung warned, when we project the anima animus onto another, we don't see the person clearly. We see our own unlived life in their eyes. This is where James Hillman deepens the mystery. Hillman didn't believe love always existed to be fulfilled. He saw love as a summons, a soul-making event. The purpose of love, to Hillman, was not necessarily happiness or partnership, but transformation. Some people are not meant to stay, they are meant to awaken. They stir the archetypal realm inside you. The dream images, the instincts, the forgotten gods. They remind you that you are more than flesh. You are myth in motion. So what if the person you're missing isn't a person? What if they were a carrier of something eternal, an archetypal function, something divine that your soul recognized and your ego mistook for human? This doesn't diminish the pain, but it reframes it. You're not broken because they left. You're cracked open because they activated a psychic task that is now yours to complete. The longing you feel is not just grief. It's unfinished initiation. Jung called it the path to individuation, the journey toward wholeness through the retrieval of all lost parts. Hillman called it soul retrieval, the poetic reimagining of your life through the wounds that refuse to close. So maybe the goal is not to forget them. Maybe the goal is to find the archetype they carried and bring it home. To see your longing not as proof of dependence, but as a map to the depths within you. That ache you feel, it's not a flaw, it's the sound of the inner lover knocking, not to be rescued, but to be remembered. When someone loves you the right way, they don't just hold your hand, they hold your image. They become your mirror. And when that mirror disappears, something far deeper than loneliness takes its place. You begin to fracture, not all at once, not visibly. It begins in subtle ways. You no longer recognize yourself in your own joy. You speak less freely, you question your instincts, and over time, your reflection, once vibrant and alive in the presence of another, begins to dull. You don't know if you're fading, or if the world has stopped looking back. In psychodynamic terms, this is identity diffusion. The good object, the person who once served as your emotional mirror, has vanished. Without them, the childlike parts of you that once felt safe enough to dance, speak, risk, and feel, retreat. This is what dissociation often looks like outside of clinical trauma. You show up to life, but you're not in it. You overachieve, but you feel like a ghost. You maintain relationships, but you feel unseen in everyone. Take Marianne, for example. In her early 20s, she met a man who loved her in a way no one had before. Completely, clearly, without condition. She was witty with him, playful, bold. He held her gaze like it was sacred. But after he moved abroad and slowly faded, Marianne began to withdraw. Years later, she's in a stable relationship, kind partner, supportive life. But she often stares into the bathroom mirror and wonders, where did I go? What left was not just him. What left was the mirror, the psychic container where her boldness felt safe. Now, those parts of her remain dormant, waiting for someone to notice. But the work isn't about finding someone new to reflect you. The work is about becoming the mirror. Because fragmentation doesn't mean you're broken, It means there are pieces of you still loyal to a time when you felt most whole, and they're waiting to be retrieved. There's a specific kind of ache that doesn't shout. It hums beneath everything. It doesn't stop you from living. It lets you work, laugh, socialize, and move forward. But late at night or early in the quiet, it presses against your ribs like a bruise you forgot was there. And it whispers something cruel. You are not enough. But what if that whisper isn't self-hatred? What if it's grief? Not the dramatic, cinematic kind, but a slow, ambient grief. The kind that comes when someone who once held your soul with reverence is no longer there to reflect it. And the love you once received, the gaze, the mirroring, the felt sense of, I see you, I choose you, you matter, has nowhere to go. This is the truth at the heart of it all. Grief is love without a home. We often mistake it for neediness. We call ourselves clingy, desperate, too emotional, too much. We're told to move on, to love ourselves harder, to stop letting the past define us. But none of these things reach the root, because what you're carrying isn't need, it's displaced love. You're not broken. You're carrying a full heart with nowhere safe to land it. That not enough feeling? It's not a verdict. It's a searchlight, a beam sweeping across the emotional terrain of your past, scanning for the last place you felt fully seen. It's the soul's way of saying, find me again. But instead of tracing the ache back to its origin, we often try to kill it. We drown it in distractions, overwork, perfectionism, shallow flings, or relentless positivity. We're terrified of what might happen if we truly sat with the pain, if we dared to listen to the longing. But what if you did? What if, instead of silencing the ache, you followed it? Could you remember that one person? The way they looked at you like you were made of meaning? Could you recall the version of yourself who emerged in their presence, unguarded, electric enough? That memory isn't weakness, it's proof. Proof that you once were loved in a way that didn't ask you to shrink. Proof that the love you lost had the power to awaken something sacred inside you. And that sacredness didn't die when they left. It's still here, just displaced. Just grieving. The work, then, is not to forget them. It's to rehome the love. To take what they once reflected and slowly, gently begin reflecting it inward. This is not a mental trick. It's a soul practice. It takes time, slowness, patience. It might begin with a journal entry, a letter you never send, a photo you stop hiding from. It might take the shape of therapy, meditation, or sitting quietly with the grief until it starts to sing instead of scream. Because grief, when honored, becomes devotion, and devotion, when owned, becomes alchemy. You're not too much. You're just missing someone who once made you feel like you were just right. And your grief is the map back to the place where that truth still lives. At some point in the grief, a quiet possibility begins to emerge. It doesn't come loudly. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels more like a question. What if the love I'm missing could live here now inside me? This is not a call to move on. It's a call to move in, to the parts of yourself that once felt real, radiant, and alive in someone else's gaze. The person who once loved you the right way, they weren't just a chapter. They were a mirror, one you trusted enough to show the most delicate, unguarded version of yourself. And though their presence may have faded, what they awakened in you remains. It was never theirs to begin with. It was always you. Now comes the sacred task, to re-find the mirror within. This is not self-love as social media sells it, loud, performative, aggressively affirming. This is the quiet work of internalization, of reclaiming the gaze that once made you feel enough, and learning to offer it to yourself. Psychoanalysts call this reparenting. Jungians call it integration. Hillman might call it soul retrieval. The names don't matter. The practice does. It begins with recognition, the courage to name that you're not enough isn't a flaw, but a compass. Each ache is pointing you back to a part of yourself that needs re-inhabiting, a softness you abandoned, a courage you forgot, a joy that's gone quiet, waiting to be spoken to again. Start small. Write a letter to the part of you they loved the most. Speak aloud the things they used to reflect, not to cling, but to claim. Return to music, clothing, ideas, or expressions you felt free to explore in their presence. Rebuild the inner stage where your soul once danced without fear. In Jungian terms, this is active imagination, the process of dialoguing with forgotten or exiled aspects of the self. In spiritual terms, it's ritual. The conscious choosing of remembrance as a doorway to restoration. Therapy, too, becomes not just a place to vent, but a new mirror. One that helps you reshape your inner image without depending on someone else to define it. Over time, a strange alchemy begins. You stop begging others to reflect you. You stop auditioning. You stop shrinking in rooms that feel unfamiliar. Because something in you has learned to say, I remember who I was when I was loved. And I can be that again, without needing permission. This is what healing becomes. Not erasing the past, but turning it into architecture. Not pretending you were never hurt, but building strength from what was once vulnerability. Not filling a hole, but realizing it was never a hole at all, but a portal back to yourself. And so the final truth is this: your not enough is not your enemy. It is your most sacred signal. It means you've known love deep enough to miss. And the longing you feel isn't weakness. It's proof that your soul remembers what it means to be whole. Let it guide you inward, not to fix what's broken, but to retrieve what was merely lost, because you were never incomplete. You were just waiting to see your reflection again. And now, you're learning how to hold the mirror yourself.